Hello, everyone. Okay, for this week, what I want to do is cover strategic thinking, which you've already read about in chapters 11 and 12. And I also want to rehash the logic model and go over some key concepts and some important takeaways for logic models. So strategic thinking. All right. So let me use myself as an example. I am responsible for a department for a health system. It's almost like a separate business, right? That I'm responsible for managing. And I'm a leader in the organization. And so by managing a department, there's day-to-day routine management issues that I'm responsible for that can really keep me very busy. And I have to be reminded by my supervisor that, okay, Christopher, it's time to, to remove yourself from the work environment and really think strategically about our future and how we can change our work so that we can be leaders in the field. And that's so important. That is what strategic thinking is all about. It's okay, I have the day to day activities, but I need time to really focus on the future and where we currently are and what the opportunities are and how we can be leaders in the field. And so that's important, right? That's really important that we, and that's what I value about my organization is that we understand that as it's built into our culture, the fabric of who we are, and it's important for leaders to allocate time. Literally, it's like I have to take a day out of the month or 2 hours a week to really focus on strategy and think about what the future is going to look like within the next 5 to 10 years and how we can position ourselves to be leaders in the work that we do. All right, so that's a perfect example and I think a good introduction to strategic thinking. All right, I like the quote here, beware of the flavor of the month, Linus Pauling quote. And it's true. I mean, because of technology and how things are changing so rapidly in this country, it's easy to get caught up in the flavor of the month. What may be hot this year may be obsolete in 2016, 2017. And so it's important for us to be sensitive to that in our planning efforts. The other is pursuing incremental improvement while rivals reinvent the industry is like fiddling while Rome burns. And that's so true. Strategic thinking is around reinvention, innovation, transformation, right? Leadership. Let's move on to the next slide. I was watching, I think the name of the movie was called The Internship, where these two goofy guys have an internship and they're working at Google. And it was a perfect reminder of this lecture and what strategic thinking is. And that's why I included the Google and the Apple icons here, because that's what they're all about, transformation, reinvention. And the employees who work there who work for these organizations are strategic thinkers, and I'm sure that's one of the ways that they assess, as part of their recruiting process. I'm sure there's lots of assessments that you'd have to complete and pass before you could even join the organization because they're testing for your ability to be a strategic thinker. Very important. So it's simply I don't want to say simply, it's the process by which an organization's direction givers can rise above the daily managerial processes and crises to gain different perspectives of the internal and external dynamics, causing change in the environment and thereby giving more effective direction to their organization. And that came directly from the text. The other piece that he says here that I like around strategic thinking is, let me see if I can find it. Come on. It's a process to see, hear, and use ingeniously the signals which can give competitive advantage. It requires the ability to create a holistic view of the interconnections between apparently contradictory trends in the environment and reframe the current mindsets which you and your competitors hold. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Competitive advantage, it's about a holistic view of the interconnections between trends in the environment and being sure not to get caught up in the day to day operations, because if you get caught up in the day-to-day operations and you're not strategically thinking, you're just status quo and making ends meet. And none of us want to be in an organization where we're just status quo and making ends meet. We want to lead and do some damn good stuff. All right, let's move on here. Strategic thinking can be promoted through different types of approaches, and those are outlined here. Again, I'm being consistent with the text. Contingency planning, sensitivity analyses, and simulation and scenario planning are examples. So let's go through each one, and I want to give you an example. Some of these examples will be more visionary and some will be more operational, but the goal is for you to appreciate these differences and how they should be incorporated in our work, regardless of where we are on the org chart. If we are in a leadership position, we should be doing some strategic thinking. All right, so contingency planning is around addressing a single uncertainty in a given situation. So let's say that there's a probability that your organization will no longer be able to accept a specific type of insurance. All right, so what would that look like and how do you plan for that? That's a single issue, an event. How do you address that? And so that's contingency planning. You're not sure, but you have a contingency plan just in case that happens. Sensitivity analysis, to examine the effect of a change in one variable while all other variables remain constant. So let's say that there's a likelihood, or you wanted to consider closing a specific service in your organization. Everything else stays the same. You just want to. There's one service that you may need to discontinue. What does that look like? Simulation, to analyze the effects of simultaneous change in multiple variables. So the example I'm going to give you is more operational in nature. Let's say that the goal is to change the registration process for the organization. So when patients come in, there's a whole new registration process that you like to implement, or you may need to implement. That's an opportunity for simulation. And then scenario planning allows for multiple changes in variables. We did a lot of scenario planning because we didn't know about, in 2008, 2009, we knew that there was a possibility that this thing called healthcare reform could happen, but we didn't know if it was going to happen or not. So we did a lot of scenario planning. What does this mean for us if it happens? What does it mean for us if a part of it happens and not the whole healthcare act? We did a lot of planning and different scenarios. Again, these are strategies that can promote strategic thinking. So let's change channels now. I want to go to logic models. I know that you've seen the video. If you haven't seen the video yet, that doesn't mean you need to stop and watch the video first. As long as you see the video at some point this week will be important. So what is a logic model? A logic model is a graphical depiction of a logical relationship between resources, activities, outputs, and outcomes of a program. The purpose of the logic model is to assess the causal relationship between elements of the program. If the resources are available for a program, then the activities can be implemented. If the activities are implemented successfully, then there'll be certain outputs, and ultimately certain outcomes will be expected. So there are different ways that you can organize logic models, and if you do a Google search and on logic model, you'll see a whole lot of ways that different people and organizations have constructed their logic models. And that's good. That's perfectly okay. The format may be driven by the purpose in which the model will be used. For example, logic models can be used for program planning. They can be used for strategic planning. They can be used for program implementation. So the takeaway here is there's not one uh, format that is universal. But there are key conceptual elements that are universal in logic models. And that's what we're going to go. That's what we're going to talk about. So here's a simple format. Inputs, activities, outputs, and then your outcomes are always going to be at the end. What do you ultimately want to achieve? So this is a very, very simple format for you. Inputs are typically resources, right? That go into making a program happen. So that may be money, it may be staff, it may be equipment. If it's education, it may be a specific evidence-based curriculum. That's a resource, okay? So an activity are activities that need to occur in order to ultimately achieve your outcome here. And so it may be the development of materials or training programs, and your outputs are produced through those activities. For example, number of booklets produced, number of workshops held, number of people trained. It may be number of people who passed the tests if it's some type of assessment. Remember, outputs are measurable. There's usually numbers with outputs, number of, percent of, okay? And then outcomes and impacts are what's the ultimate result, what you want to achieve, increased skills, knowledge, confidence, leading to a long-term promotion, new job, etc. All right, so this is pretty much it's a very simple framing for you for how a logic model can be constructed. Let's go to, I'm going to give you like 3 examples, I think, on the next few slides. So this one's a little more advanced. Well, it's not too much advanced. It's completed, right? There's more content here. But it's the same format as this slide here. Yeah. All right. Inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes. Ultimate goal to improve health status. So you see all of the inputs are listed here, right? And then all of the activities. And then outputs, outcomes, and your ultimate goal. So this here, your work planned, and then here, your intended results. And this is from the Calhoun County Health Improvement Program in Michigan. I'm not going to go through all this. You can read it at your leisure. I just want to be sure that you understand conceptually what we're doing here. Here's one that's a little more advanced. All right, so you have this is from the Colorado School-Based Health Center. This is their logic model and evaluation plan. So they have incorporated evaluation as part of their logic model. And you can do that. All right, you can certainly do that. So you see their inputs here, outputs, and then they have short-term outcomes, intermediate outcomes, and then long-term outcomes. That's another way that it can be organized, and I've seen that many times in logic models. This one here is a little different. They've started with their inputs at the bottom. This is from the World Heart Federation. I think it's a world organization around cardiovascular health and heart disease prevention. So their inputs are at the bottom, and then their activities here. Outputs, you see here, they're going to have 5 community gardens, 30% of teachers trained, 70% of students trained, 70% of students with increased knowledge, right? Outcomes, these are short-term outcomes, and then your long-term outcomes are here. Ultimately, we want to reduce childhood obesity. So I've seen some folks, when they think about logic models, they always start with the ultimate. It's probably good to start with your ultimate goal, even though it's the last thing that's presented in the framework. You need to know what your ultimate end result is going to be, right? So if your ultimate end result is to increase market share, you can have a logic model around increasing market share. If your overall result is to reduce readmissions, you can create a logic model around how you can do that. There's some key considerations for logic models. Please do not confuse a logic model with a work plan. Logic models are conceptual frameworks for how to achieve an outcome. Work plans are much more detailed. For example, they include actions and tasks and due dates and persons responsible and status updates. And I've given you an example of that in the in the module, I think it's the discussion that has course templates, all the different templates that you can use. And so a logic model is not a strategic plan. Please do not present your strategic plan as a logic model. All right? It can be used to support aspects of a plan, but it is not a strategic plan. That's very, very important. And then logic models can be effective in developing and evaluating programs. They're really good to, if you're working on a grant application and you want the reviewers to see the logic behind your activities or how you're going to achieve that long-term goal, it's a great way to frame it. It's logical, it makes sense, and reviewers are less confused. So I think that's it for this week, and I just wanted to say I hope all is going well, and I will see you next week. Take care.